Our America, Nuestra América, by José Martí. The conceited villager believes the entire world to be his village, provided that he can be mayor, humiliate the rival who stole his sweetheart, or add to the savings in his strongbox. He considers the universal order good, unaware of those giants with 7-league boots who can crush him underfoot, or of the strife in the heavens between comets that go through the air asleep, gulping down worlds. What remains of the village in America must rouse itself. These are not the times for sleeping in a nightcap, but with weapons for a pillow, like the warriors of Juan de Castellanos, weapons of the mind, which conquer all others. Barricades of ideas are worth more than barricades of stones. There is no plow that can cut through a cloudbank of ideas. A powerful idea waved before the world at the proper time can stop a squadron of ironclad ships, like the mystical flag of the Last Judgment. Nations that do not know one another should quickly become acquainted, as men who are to fight a common enemy. Those who shake their fists, like jealous brothers coveting the same tract of land, or like the modest cottager who envies the esquire his mansion, should clasp his hands and become one. Those who use the authority of a criminal tradition to lop off the hands of their defeated brother with a sword stained with his own blood ought to return the lands of the brother already punished sufficiently, if do not want the people to call them robbers. The honest man does not absolve himself of debts of honor with money, at so much a slap. We can no longer be a people of leaves, living in the air, our foliage heavy with blooms, and crackling or humming at the whim of the sun's caress, or buffeted and tossed by the storms. The trees must form ranks to keep the giant with 7-league boots from passing. It is the time of mobilization, of marching together, and we must go forward in close ranks, like silver in the veins of the Andes. Only those born prematurely are lacking in courage. Those without faith in their country are 7-month weaklings, because they have not courage. They deny it to the others. Their puny arms with bracelets and hands with painted nails, arms of Paris or Madrid, can hardly reach the bottom limb, and they climb the tallest tree to be climbable. The ship should be loaded with those harmful insects that gnaw at the bone of the country, that nourishes them. If they Parisians or from Paris, let them go to the Prado to boast about, or to Torini's in high hats. Those carpenters' sons who are ashamed that their fathers are carpenters. Those born in America who are ashamed of the mother that reared them, because she wears an Indian apron, and who disown their sick mothers, the scoundrels, abandoning her on her sickbed. Then who is a real man? He who stays with his mother and nurses her in her illness, or he who puts her to work out of sight and lives at her expense on decadent lands, sporting fancy neckties, cursing the womb that carried him, displaying the sign of the traitor on the back of his paper frock coat. These sons of our America, which will be saved by its Indians in blood and is growing better. These deserters who take up arms in the army of a North America that drowns its Indians in blood and is growing worse. These delicate creatures who are men but are unwilling to do men's work. The Washington who made this land for them, did he not go to live with the English at a time when he saw them fighting against his own country? These unbelievable of honor who drag the honor over foreign soil like their counterparts in the French Revolution, with their dancing, their affections, their drawling speech. For in what lands can man take more pride than in our long-suffering American republics, raised up among the silent Indian masses by the bleeding arms of 100 apostles to the sound of battle between the book and processional candle? Never in history have such advances and united nations been forged in so short a time from such disorganized elements. The presumptuous man feels that the earth was made to serve as his pedestal because he happens to have a facile pen or colorful speech, and he accuses his native land of being worthless and beyond redemption because its virgin jungles fail to provide him with a constant means of traveling over the world, driving Persian ponies and lavishing champagne like a tycoon. The incapacity does not lie with the emerging country in quest of suitable forms and utilitarian greatness. It lies rather with those who attempt to rule nations of a unique and violent character. by means of laws inherited from 4 centuries of freedom in the United States and 19 centuries of monarchy in France. A decree by Hamilton does not halt the charge of the plainsman's horse. A phrase by Sieyès does nothing to quicken the stagnant blood of the Indian race. To govern well, one must see things as they are. And the able governor in America is not the one who knows how to govern the Germans or the French. He must know the elements that make up his own country and how to bring them together, using methods and institutions originating within the country to reach that desirable state where each man can attain self-realization, and all may enjoy the abundance that nature has bestowed in everyone in the nation, to enrich with their toil and defend with their lives. Government must originate in the country. The spirit of government must be that of the country. Its structure must conform to rules appropriate to the country. Good government is nothing more than the balance of the country's natural elements. That is why in America, the imported book has been conquered by the natural man. Natural men have conquered, learned, and artificial men. The native half-breed has conquered the exotic Creole. The struggle is not between civilization and barbarity, but between false erudition and nature. The natural man is good, and he respects and rewards superior intelligence as long as his humility is not turned against him, or he is not offended by being disregarded, something that natural men never forgives. Prepared as he is to forcibly regain the respect of whoever has wounded his pride or threatened his interests. It is by conforming with this disdained native element that the tyrants of America have climbed to power, and have fallen as soon as they betrayed them. Republics have paid with oppression for their inability to recognize the true elements of their countries, to derive from them the right kind of government, and to govern accordingly. In a new nation, a government means a creator. In nations composed of both cultured and uncultured elements, the uncultured will govern because it is their habit to attack and resolve doubts with their fists in cases where the cultured have failed in the art of governing. The uncultured masses are lazy and timid in the realm of intelligence, and they want to be governed well. But if the government hurts them, they shake it off and govern themselves. How can the universities produce governors if not a single university in America teaches the rudiments of the art of government, the analysis of elements peculiar to the peoples of the Americas? The young go out into the world wearing Yankee or French spectacles, hoping to govern a people they do not know. In the political race, entrants should not go for the best ode, but for the best study of the political factors of one's country. Newspapers, universities, and schools should encourage the study of the country's pertinent components. To know them is sufficient, without mincing words, for whoever brushes aside even a part of the truth, whether through intention or oversight, is doomed to fail. The truth is built without it. It is easy to resolve our problem knowing its components, then resolve them without knowing them. Along comes the natural man, strong and indignant, and he topples all the justice accumulated from books because he has not been governed in accordance with the obvious needs of the country. Knowing is what counts. To know one's country and govern it with that knowledge is the only way to free it from tyranny. The European university must bow to the American university. The history of America from the Incas to the present must be taught in clear detail and to the letter, even if the archons of Greece are overlooked. Our Greece must take priority over the Greece which is not ours. We need it more. Nationalist statement must replace foreign statement. Let the world be grafted onto our republics, but the trunk must be our own. And let the vanquished pedant hold his tongue, for there are no lands in which a man may take greater pride than in our long-suffering American republics. With the rosary as our guide, our heads white and our bodies mottled, both Indians and Creoles, we fearlessly entered the world of nations. We set out to conquer freedom under the banner of the Virgin. A priest, a few lieutenants, and a woman raised the Republic of Mexico onto the shoulder of the Indians. A few heroic students, instructed in French liberty by a Spanish cleric, made Central America rise and revolt against Spain under a Spanish general. In monarchic garb, emblazoned with the sun, the Venezuelans to the north and the Argentinians to the south began building nations. When the heroes clashed and the continent was about to rock, one of them, and not the lesser, handed the reins to the other. And since heroism in times of peace is rare because it is not as glorious as in times of war, it is easier to govern when feelings are exalted and united than after a battle. When decisive, arrogant, exotic, and ambitious thinking emerges, the forces routed in the epic struggle with the feline cunning of the species and using the weight of realities were undermining the new structure which comprises both the rough and ready, unique regions of our half-breed America, and the silk-stockinged and frock-coated people of Paris beneath the flag of freedom and reason borrowed from the nations skilled in the arts of government. The hierarchical constitution of the colonies resisted the democratic organization of the republics. The cravated capitals left their country boots in the vestibule. The bookworm redeemers failed to realize that the revolution succeeded because it came from the soul of the nation. They had to govern with that soul and not without or against it. America began to suffer, and still suffers, from the tiresome task of reconciling the hostile and discordant elements it inherited from the despotic and perverse colonizer, and the imported methods and ideas which have been retarding logical government because they are lacking in local realities. Thrown out of gear for 3 centuries by a power which denied men the right to use their reason, the continent disregarded or closed its ears to the unlettered throngs that helped bring it to redemption, and embarked on a government based on reason, a reason belonging to all for the common good, not the university brand of reason over the peasant brand. The problem, if independence did not lie in a change of forms, but in a change of spirit. It was imperative to make common cause with the oppressed, in order to secure a new system opposed to the ambitions and governing habits of the oppressors. The tiger, frightened by the gunfire, returns at night to his prey. He dies with his eyes shooting flames and his claws unsheathed. He cannot be heard coming because he approaches with velvet tread. When the prey awakens, the tiger is already upon it. The colony lives on the republic, and our America saving itself from its enormous mistakes, the pride of its capital cities, the blind triumph of a scorned peasantry, the excessive influx of foreign ideas and formulas, the wicked and unpolitical disdain for the aboriginal race, because of the higher virtue, enriched with necessary blood, or a republic struggling against a colony. The tiger lurks again every tree, lying in wait at every turn. He will die with his claws unsheathed and his eyes shooting flames. But these countries will be saved, as was announced by the Argentinian Rivadavia, whose only sin was being a gentleman in these rough and ready times. A man does not sheath a machete in a silken scabbard, nor can he lay aside the short lance merely because he is angered and stands at the door of Iturbide's Congress, demanding that the fair-haired one be named emperor. These countries will be saved because a genius for moderation, found in the serene harmony of nature, seems to prevail in the continent of light, where there emerges a new, real man schooled for these real times in the critical philosophy of guesswork and phalanstery that saturated the previous generation. We were a phenomenon with a chest of an athlete, the hands of a dandy, and the brain of a child. We were a masquerader in English breeches, Parisian vest, North American jacket, and Spanish cap. The Indian hovered near us in silence and went off to hills to baptize his children. The Negro was seen pouring out the songs of his heart at night, alone and unrecognized among the rivers and wild animals. The peasant, the creator, turned in blind indignation against the disdainful city, against his own child. As for us, we were nothing but epaulets and professors' gown in countries that came into the world wearing hemp sandals and headbands. It would have been the mark of genius to couple the headband and the professor's gown with the founding fathers' generosity and courage to rescue the Indian, to make a place for the competent Negro, to fit liberty to the body of those who rebelled and conquered for it. We were left with the hearer, the general, the scholar, and the sinecure, the angelic young, as if caught in the tentacles of an octopus lunged heavenward only to fall back, crowned with clouds in sterile glory. The native, driven by instinct, swept away the golden staffs of office in blind triumph. Neither the Europeans nor the Yankee could provide the key to the Spanish-American riddle. Hate was attempted, and every year the countries amounted to less. Exhausted by the senseless struggle between the book and the lance, between reason and the processional candle, between the city and the country, weary of the impossible rule by rival urban cliques over the natural nation, tempestuous or inert by turns. We being almost unconsciously to try love, nations stand up and greet one another. What are we? Is the mutual question, and little by little they furnish answers. When a problem arises in Kohimar, they do not seek its solution in Danzig. The frock coat are still French, but thought begins to be American. The youth of America are rolling up their sleeves, digging their hands in the dough and making it rise with the sweat of their brows. They realize that there is too much imitation, and that creation holds the key to salvation. Create is the password of this generation. The wine is made from plantain, but even if it turns sour, it is our wine. That a country's form of government must be in keeping with its natural elements is a foregone conclusion. Absolute ideas must take relative form if they are not to fail because of an error in form. Freedom to be viable has to be sincere and complete. If a public refuses to open its arms at all, if a republic refuses to open its arms to all and move ahead with all, it dies. The tiger within sneaks in through the crack. So does the tiger from without. The general holds back his cavalry to a pace that suits his infantry, for if its infantry is left behind, the cavalry will be surrounded by the enemy. Politics and strategy are one. Nations should live in an atmosphere of self-criticism because it is healthy, but always with one heart and one mind. Stoop to the unhappy and lift them up in your arms. Thaw out frozen America with the fire of your hearts. Make the natural blood of the nations course vigorously through their veins. The new American are on their feet, saluting each other from nation to nation. The eyes of the laborer shining with joy. The natural statesman arises, schooled in the direct study of nature. He reads to apply his knowledge, not to imitate. Economists study the problems at their point of origin. Speakers begin a policy of moderation. Playwrights bring native characters to the stage. Academies discuss practical subjects. Poetry shears off its zoria like locks and hangs its red vest on the glorious tree. Selective and sparkling prose is filled with ideas. In the Indian republics, the governors are learning Indian. America is escaping all its dangers. Some of the republics are still beneath and sleeping octopus, but others, under the law of averages, are draining their land with sublime and furious haste, as if to make up for centuries lost. Still others, forgetting that Juarez went about in a carriage drawn by mules, hitch their carriages to the wind, their coachmen soap bubbles. Poisonous luxury. The enemy of freedom corrupts the frivolous and opens the door to the foreigner. In others, where independence is threatened, an epic spirit heightens their manhood. Still others spawn an army capable of devouring them in voracious wars. But perhaps our America is running another risk that does not come from itself but from the difference in origins, methods, and interests between the two halves of the continent. And the time is near at hand when an enterprising and vigorous people who scorn and ignore our America will even so approach it and demand a close relationship. And since strong nations, self-made by law and shotgun, love strong nations and them along, since the time of madness and ambition from which North America may be freed by the predominance of the purest elements in its blood, or on which it may be launched by its vindictive and sordid masses. Its tradition of expansion or the ambition of some powerful leader is not so near at hand, even to the most timorous eye, that there is no time for the test of discreet and unwavering pride that could confront and dissuade it, since its good name as a republic in the eyes of the world's perceptive nations puts upon North America a restraint that cannot be taken away by childish provocations, or pompous arrogance, or parricidal discords among our American nations. The pressing need of our America is to show itself as it is, one in spirit and intent, swift conquerors of a suffocating past, stained only by the enriching blood drawn from the scarves left upon us by our masters. The scorn of our formidable neighbor who does not know us is our America's greatest danger. And since the day of the visit is near, it is imperative that our neighbor know us, and soon, so that it will not scorn us. Through ignorance it might even come to lay hands on us. Once it does know us, it will remove its hands out of respect. One must have faith in the best in men and distrust the worst. One must allow the best to be shown so that it reveals and prevails over the worst. Nations should have a pillory for whoever stirs up useless hate, and another for whoever fails to tell them the truth in time. There can be no racial animosity because there are no races. The theorist and feeble thinkers string together and warm over the bookshelf races which the well-disposed observer and the fair-minded traveler vainly seek in the justice of nature, where man's universal identity springs forth from triumphant love and the turbulent hunger for life. The soul, equal and eternal, emanates from bodies of different shapes and colors. Whoever foments and spreads antagonism and hate between the races sins against humanity. But as nations take shape among other different nations, there is condensation of vital and individual characteristics of thought, habit, expansion, and conquest, vanity and greed, which could, from the latent state of national concern and in the period of internal disorder, or the rapidity with which the country's character has been accumulating, be turned into a serious threat for the weak and isolated neighboring countries, declared by the strong country to be inferior and perishable. The thought is father to the deed, and one must not attribute, through a provincial antipathy, a fatal and inborn wickedness to the continent's fair-skinned nation simply because it does not speak our language, nor see the world as we see it, nor resemble us in its political defects, so different from ours, nor favorably regard the excitable, dark-skinned people, or look charitably from its still uncertain eminence upon those less favored by history, who climb the road of republicanism by heroic stages. The self-evident facts of the problem should not be obscured, because the problem can be resolved for peace of centuries to come by appropriate study and by tacit and immediate union in the continental spirit. With a single voice, the hymn is already being sung. The present generation is carrying industrious America along the road enriched by their sublime fathers. From Rio Grande to the Straits of Magellan, the great semi, astride its condor, spread the seed of the new America over the romantic nations of the continent in the sorrowful islands of the sea.